Okay, and we are getting started. So, so yeah. Thank you. Okay, so today we are, so today we are getting into our discussion of conflictual quality. And, and so, um, a couple of weeks ago, we got through chapters 1 and 4. We had a little bit of a blip for chapter 7, so hopefully we'll come back to those either tomorrow or next week. But anyway, today we are starting with chapter 7. And if you are here watching us, thank you so much for joining us today. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. I recently started a Facebook page for us, and we also have a Twitter page. Both of them are ADOS Kansas City. If you want to follow us there, please do. And also, if you want to support our growth as a group in Kansas City, please support. We are $ADOSKC on Cash. And those are all the announcements we need to get through this morning, and let's get started. So, open up the notes here. Chapter 7 featured a lot of examples of what happened directly after the Civil War as far as Black Americans that actually did get land grants or had the opportunity to buy land, to purchase land. Or starting with the example of the Timbuktu experimental commune. That, of course, failed. We all know that most of the instances of Black ADOS getting land after the were not sustained. In this particular case, ADOS from the north were given the grants, but since they didn't have knowledge of farming, those opportunities did not last. Darity and Mullen note in the book that if Southern ADOS were given those same opportunities, they might have lasted longer because former states in the South did actually work. They had knowledge of agriculture that would have made farming more productive for them. Let's start with that one. So, does anyone have any thoughts on that example? And this is the example of Timbuktu, the experimental comic. My page reference is not the same as the actual physical copy. So I'll just give references as far as what in the book. I'm not exactly where. I read the digital copy through my book.
Page 125.
Page 125. Thank you, Brian. Page 125, and from here, I would say one thing I did wonder is why is Northern ADOS were given their freedom, they were given their freedom earlier than Southerners were. That's why the Civil War happened first, because there was the fight to have slaves king. So with that, without Southerners given the same opportunities as the Northern slaves, do you think that also was a hindrance to Black Americans being able to actually get their full citizenship? I love how private it gets in everything. And also, if you're watching, please feel free to join along. We read the comments, we respond. So if you have any input, we'll feel free to add a comment. So it seems like any input on that part? There were also other settlements for Black in the West and organized in the West. I think specifically in Missouri, I think there was actually a war that happened in Missouri that worked to push indigenous tribes out of Missouri so that white settlers could take over that land. And that would have been the land that Black slaves were working on. And after the Civil War ended, they were given opportunities for work. However, those were low-paying, unskilled jobs, and there was also still the threat of mobs and counterculture, which again really isn't an example of how Black Americans were able to achieve the proper full citizenship after the war. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? On examples of in Missouri after the war?
Yeah. But I do have a comment, but more generally about probably just a general comment about how the Timbuktu experiment and all the antebellum, all the antebellum experiments didn't serve as any kind of a lesson or post-bellum experiment, and not just providing land, but providing protection, like shepherding the community into the future without the fear of being re-enslaved, kidnapped, just straight up murdered, right? Intimidated, all that stuff. I mean, we'll get to it, I guess, as we move into chapter 8 and 9. But the failures of Reconstruction, I got to admit, I didn't understand the depth of failure of Reconstruction, and really more even the immediacy.
Was it failure or was it? Because like one thing I'm starting to notice, like when we look at American history, there are all these instances where I feel like there were opportunities to create what the Constitution said, like an equal society. We had those opportunities, and like I used to think, we missed that opportunity, we missed that opportunity. But the more and more I read, the more and more I feel like it's very intentional.
Yeah.
Like how you create vagrancy laws directly after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah.
That's intentional. Then we go from vagrancy laws to convict leasing, and now we're leasing our prisoners to go do jobs. I don't believe like that was. I don't believe that was just a misstep. I feel very much like that was very much intentional.
Yeah.
Specifically when we don't repeal the last vagrancy law until 72. So now you have any warrant to arrest them, just like with the crime bill that Biden passed. From how I understood it, the incentive was placed on making the arrest for the officer. So now you have officers that aren't necessarily trying to solve crime. They just need a body. So now if I can get him arrested, I've done my part. Now we look at the judicial system. Now we look at the sentence. I'm from Louisiana, so we still have a draconian sentence. And I think murder in Louisiana was 99 years up until like maybe 10 years ago. And so now you have the police that are incentivized by making arrests. Then you have a legal system that's incentivized by putting a lot of bodies into prison, because the industrial complex and all the money back from that. And you have a lot of people that get rich off all of those. So like to me, I don't, like I said, I used to think that, this was like a misstep. We did this here. We got 48%. We would have, it took us 150 years of chattel slavery in American history to, to get to this point that we free the slaves. It's like we free the slaves and then we pay the slave owners, but we don't pay the slaves. Like I don't believe that was just a misstep. Like I feel it's very intentional, which is why I think it's very important that when we attack it, how we're going about it, we have to be very vigilant. Because to go in there with we tried mindset, I feel like totally takes away all of the sacrifice and suffering that has come from multiple generations. Since the beginning or before 150 years before the beginning of the So that's the way I say. I don't know if you guys see it like that, but I know for me, whenever I'm reviewing the history, read the homestead. And it's like, well, man, these are great programs. Like, these are great programs to get people introduced economically, to get them jobs, to get them stable. We just we couldn't take advantage of any of those opportunities. And I very much feel like it was done specifically in that. So that's why I wanted to push for reparations, to push for what we're doing is so important. Because I feel like we have to counteract everything. So, yeah.
So you're saying that it wasn't just a misstep, like even though the Republican government at the time, after mid 1860, did do some policies for Black America, that those were intentionally they were intentional, like they were never, they weren't. And I'm sorry, I want to know.
Maybe, like the attempts weren't sincere from the outset.
No, not at all.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would go that far.
Yeah, I think there was a genuine desire for radical to abolish slavery. Somehow along the way, the Southerners were just too influential in government that there was a lot of pushback from them. We forget, after Lincoln died and Andrew Johnson was in office, he went back on everything, and he had the support of, and he gave all the Southern project power. He allowed them to get back into the government, and that's how they established or reestablished pre-Reconstruction society.
Well, I think the question. Thank you. The question that I have, like when we talk about why, like when we're talking about Reconstruction, we're talking about civil war, why it started. From my understanding, the issue in the North was the Southerners were counted prison as people. and having voting power based on those people.
Right.
And that's why the Northerners had an issue, because they was like, you don't get to use your slave, you don't have slaves. It was never about the freedom of the people. It was, you have an unfair advantage because you get to count your slaves as
part of the
yeah, like it's part of the census.
Yeah.
And so that's the pushback for the North. Like, because from how and this, just my opinion, but how I understand it, it was never about the emancipation of the people. That happened from how I understand it. When Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation, one, it only freed slaves in the states that were still a part of the U.S. because states were seceded. So when he signs that to keep America whole. I don't think it was nothing about the slave. Because think about, at that point in time, there's nothing in America that's more expensive than a slave at that point.
So the Union was more worried about Southerners getting too much power
Yes.
and rising up.
Yeah.
And the Southerners feel like we are the reason America is rich.
Yeah.
All of the money comes from here.
Yeah.
We should have more power. Just like it is now. If you think about most people that live up north, what I would consider, here, but people that
Well,
live.
how was the slave state? That's why but it was still a slave state.
Yeah, and I'm not very familiar with Missouri. I've heard of Bloody Kansas, but I'm not familiar with the differences. What I see, the big difference I know being in Missouri and being from Louisiana is it's a lot more political. Like where I'm from, I think the first time I had my first extreme racial situation, I was 7 years old, walking my friend's house. Guy walks out his driveway with a shotgun. Like, yeah, go back down the street. Oh,
yeah, that with it's more
political. Yeah, and see, I actually prefer that. I actually prefer the Louisiana way.
Yeah,
you know exactly what it is, what it ain't. It ain't no guessing. But from how I understand, going back to pre-Reconstruction, the slaves, the slaves want to be, or the Southerners should, the slaves should be found as voting power. The Northerners have an issue. There's a big back and forth. And this is where we get into the whole context of, like you said, the ties change. Because now the South is powerful. The South is making a lot. There is a lot. I just, from how I see it, like I said, if it was really about freeing the slave, if it was really about making someone whole, again, it's totally different. But if the emancipation is what we think it is, there's no need for civil rights. Like, why would I need civil rights? If I'm free, I already have all the rights to do everything anybody else. That's another reason I feel like none of it was. I personally, this is I don't personally feel like anybody's intention was to actually free the slaves and introduce us into America.
It was just.
Well, yeah. I agree with that. I guess my point was that even if you take the altruistic aspect out of it, like the human rights aspect out of it, you'd think that even if there was the, we'll just say business, sociological element, they would have thought we can't allow this bifurcated system between North and South. We've got to allow we've got to create some form of emancipation. And with the point I was making was the failures of Timbuktu and the other examples in chapter 7.
There's also a court.
Yeah, I was thinking. I guess the point I was making is that you would think that even if it was purely mechanistic mindset, they would have realized we have to do a better job if we want this to succeed, even if we don't care about humanity aspect, but also human rights aspect. If we want this to succeed without perpetual war between North and South, we've got to protect people. We've got to or else it's literally just. I guess the other option is that they had no intention of. I don't know. I don't know how you get to a point where you say the North wants to balance the population equation and the economic, inequality, the driver, and the North says, well, we don't necessarily going on the hypothetical that we're talking about. That there's no altruistic what North said. We don't care about the people themselves, but we need to balance things out. We have to make southern slaves free. So even mechanistically thinking, they would have had to say, we've got to figure out how to do this so that they survive. Otherwise, we're going to need perpetual war. Yeah. And that was my point about failure of Reconstruction. But even if they don't give a crap about black people enslaved at that time, it still has to work.
Well, that's what we did the 3/5 compromise, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you have to consider. I mean,
I'm just talking about like violence.
Oh,
yeah.
On the ground.
Well, in the Fort Worth experiment, it was predicated on the principle that newly freed slaves should have opportunity to engage in homesteading, then vacated by subsidization.
Yeah.
However, the Union didn't protect Black Americans in Fort Worth from whites who preyed upon remunerated contraband or raised from military force. So it wanted them to be free. So the Southerners couldn't have power, but they weren't working to protect the former slaves.
Well, see, and that's what makes me.
Citizens should have been protected.
Yeah.
That's what makes me feel like the intent is genuine. Like if I write you a check for $100 because I owe you, and I know I ain't got the money. You see what I'm saying? Like I can't write a law saying you're free to live your life, but not have any enforcement to protect you in that. Like what? Then I'm right.
But then you get,
And you know, not the word I want to use, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like you're free,
But you're not. And see, and like I said, this is just my perspective, and you know, I always open pushback. I'm open to pushback. But like how genuine is America when we say, okay, you're free to vote, you're free to work in these places, and we still have black and white sign only, or we have voter suppression at the poll, or we have these impossible tests that you have to take in order to vote. Like I just don't believe like that's been genuine at all. Because when I look at it on the opposite end, we have the New Deal, and this piece of legislation is written for all of the Irish immigrants and everybody up in the New York area and the New England area. You write the New Deal, and these people get these jobs. They don't get any pushback from the community. You know, the laws are abided by. Like there's teeth, there's enforcement. So to me, it goes hand in hand. A law is meaningless if you don't have the power to enforce what's on the piece of paper. And that's what makes me feel like we can't have a genuine intention.
Because the Union didn't have power?
Well, because there was no enforcement.
Or they were
more committed.
Yeah. But see, and that's what makes me feel like it was never, the intent was never to create a situation like Brian was talking about earlier, where, as you said, the North needs it to work. Even if they don't give a damn about the slaves, they need the system to work. Well, the system works for those in power. But for the slaves, it's not going to work because there's no teeth there to ensure that. So like, no, we wrote your law, you shut up. But now the argument is, well, I know what the law says, but I know what your life is. And I think from that, you have that, and from that specific situation, I think it's the inception of the conflict. Because now you have a group of people saying we are being treated fair based on the laws that are passed. And then you have people saying, well, I passed the law, what more do you want to do? And then after a while, I'm just ignore it.
There was a study from the American Freedom of Inquiry Commission. Where done, but it states that there was there was widespread poverty among enslaved and freed and they desperately needed emergency relief, and there was a desire for remuneration and work. So basically, they wanted to be able to work, but they didn't have jobs. They needed places to live, but they had no home, and they needed emergency funds to be able to eat to survive. But there wasn't.
I think that's the perfect litmus test for our problem. Because I feel like everything you just named is an issue for our community.
They also that emancipation shouldn't be a gradual process. That discounted or free land was.
I agree. Well, isn't that what we get 40 acres of fuel from?
And then there's a comparison to the enslavement of West Indian Black, and it says that they did better when their freedom was.
But I mean, what is there such thing as conditional freedom? Either you're free or you're not. I don't think there's a middle. Either I have every right as every other American citizen or I don't. Because if I don't have every other right as every other American citizen, I'm a second class citizen. And I'm a, you know, I think it definitely is like that for certain. It's kind of like being pregnant. You're not almost pregnant. Either you're pregnant or you're not. There's no in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about freedom. You're either free or you're not. If you can't, you know, if I don't have every opportunity to create a life for myself that Brian has, I'm not free, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the history of America, regardless of anything. Either I have the same citizenship rights. It's something we speak a lot about. Either I have citizenship rights or I don't. And if I'm, you know, you look at the prison population, the murders, police, you know, the police murder statistics on our community, it's apparent. Like there's nothing, like there's been no place in the history of the world that incarcerated Black people. It ain't even close. Like it's not remotely close. And I think that's, at least for me, I feel like we have to be very careful when we're speaking about things such as freedoms. And like when we talk about the laws we passed and what's on the books and attitudes at the time, we have to think about what we're specifically talking about. We're talking about people's right to live. If you just come off of a plantation, you just were abolished, you know, slavery was just abolished. Like you said, yeah, we are looking for it. That's all we ever done anyway is work. We've been working 300 years a day. Like, that's all we know to do is work. We just need a job. We want to pay a fair wage. But like we talked about, there's no agency, you know, no police force, there's no group that holds accountable what's actually happening. Because if you can't enforce the laws on the books, they're pointless.
That's so much more. I mean, you talk about mass incarceration today, but I just read an article. I mean, it was from 2018. The Yahoo article stating that Wall Street makes millions off of police brutality. So.
Oh, wait, they make millions?
Yeah. So
I'm sure they securitize.
Yeah, they call police brutality.
Oh shit.
And
Yeah.
I don't remember the details.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's not go into Wall Street.
But the point of it is that Black bodies are still at a higher profit when they're being in jail.
Yeah. Dead bonded.
Well, how do we shine? Well, that's
So
going
when you
on
say,
team.
it kind of ties in because when you say that we need to clearly that we need full citizenship. How can we get full citizenship when it's more profitable to keep us in today?
Yeah.
I think that one of the first things, and this really ties into a lot of things I see going on, like, because something we have to get out of the mind of, if it didn't work back then, it won't work now. Because we have access to way more information now than then. So one thing I think about, just like you said that, you know, we were talking about police brutality. I think that's so outrageous. I actually think things like that don't argue because we just need to pull the sheet down.
Yeah.
Like the hard work is done. Like the system, racism is so intervened into what we know as American life. All we have to do is pull the real sheet down. Because if people look into your real life, like what really happens, it's apparent. Like there's no way you can get away from it. Just like the emancipation compensation idea. Like you actually paid the slave owners and never paid the slave. I don't think people know that. So like when you have emancipation compensation, when you have police brutality burn, when you have, the prison incarceration rates, we have the wealth rate. I feel like all of that makes our case. Because what you're telling me, and you telling me, our government tells me I have just as much a right to have a free life in American society. That's what the Constitution's supposed to say.
But in reality.
And I think the reality is I can prove that in your document. Like with everything that you say is official, I can prove that you full of it. Because we know black women are the most educated. But we know when we're talking about equal pay, it's work. We also know, on top of being the most educated, the average black woman's average wealth rate in college is $11,000. Like we know that. And we also can take that, cross-reference that with the 10 minutes to closing the racial wealth gap, right? That talks about getting a college degree, getting, buying land, buying property, owning, home ownership. Like, no, I could do everything right and still.
Right. Like, I think I mentioned like a little of on the ADOS case where a council was talking about job fair, and he put hashtag no excuse in it. I'm like, what does that mean? You're telling the people to your black people that, oh, the jobs are there, so you have no excuse. I'm like, yeah, but are those employers offering fair job opportunities?
Well,
Are they offering living wages? And don't say no, it's like no excuses. When in reality, that even if they do get the job, they won't get paid what they should. It'll be some entry level position, right?
Base pay.
Yeah.
Well, look. Well, this is another thing. As a community, as an ADOS community, I feel like it's our responsibility to push back on, whether that's an elected official or whoever it was making that post saying no excuse. My thing is this: I elect you. Like, you don't tell me what my excuse is. Like, you'll work for me. Like, no, if I get the job, these are my issues. This is why this doesn't work. And more importantly, my question to the constituency would be, why did you elect the person who don't know? Like, you elected him, and he's coming at you on ain't no excuse to take me. You work for me, homeboy. Like, hey, you don't talk to me like this. Or you finna get up out that seat. That's how that works.
You should meet him. I know you're talking about. Yeah, you should talk to him. He's opinionated, but he's also very willing to.
Yeah.
He likes to argue.
Yeah.
He's a young guy too. He's not an old.
No, he's ours.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's tie it back into Jonathan. So what he did with Reconstruction, we can all agree. Like we say, he's more
Andrew Johnson's after.
Yeah, he was the vice president.
But I'm kind of wondering, like, how quickly he changed his narrative from being, saying that Southern professionals jail, they should strip their land, to saying give it all back. So I'm wondering that the people who got into that position, did they see that coming? Could they have predicted that? Or how could, were they informed?
I think
voters?
I think that came more from elected officials than people, because I feel the elected officials at the time noticed we're losing our country, because I feel like the North very well understands we don't survive without Southern plantation. We don't. We know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's funny you talking about Wall Street. The first stocks traded on Wall Street were black men. Yeah. So it's like this is very much a part of everything we even understand. And I think that push to give it all back is it's either this or we're not Americans.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that came from the people at all. Because think about it. At this point in time, what is this? This is what Reconstruction is in 1850s?
1866.
Okay. So at this
and it was
point,
only supposed to be 1 year. I read that. It was only supposed to be a 1 year.
At this point, slavery is what, 200 years old? It's like 200 years, but you've been making a whole hell of a lot of money from this one industry. Because you take 1619 to 18.
Yeah.
65.
Yeah.
But I mean, even then, there are. Go ahead, Ms. Mullen.
Clients have never been a mistake. The fact that we have taught, how to live free is absurd. That's some of the benefits of live. That's what it's taught how to live free. That's all.
And it's funny you say that, and like think about how, and to me it's scary. Think about how scary it is that we literally don't understand freedom. Like we think about freedom like, no, we're free today, right? Like it's a very unsure thing. Like you and this is me personally. For sure, but that's what we've always been free, right? Since we've been here. And which is another reason why I think what we do is so important. Because like you said, at this point in Reconstruction, we 1776 to 1860. So we almost 100 years into American society. And we have to understand that 150 years before you have America, you have an institution of chattel slavery. Like chattel slavery has been up and running long before America became big. So now we're looking at it, it's like, well, how do we deal with it? I think that's where, the 3/5 compromise comes in. And I feel a lot when we see these politicians, whether they're presidents or VPs, when we see something like the Emancipation Proclamation, see something, something as large as that. I always view it from the level of the ends have to justify. If we don't give them this, then we can't win the long game. Think about it. Even after they freed the slaves, even after the 3/5 compromise, now you have, just like what we talked about, now you're starting to see Jim Crow, you're starting to see black codes, you're starting to see sharecropping, you're starting to see slavery of a different ilk. Because you're still taking advantage of people.
It was still slavery. I mean, they were still having Black Americans who were labor for free. They prisoners were building roads. They were still working the field.
Well, I will say this though, I think you have to speak about it, because also coming out of Reconstruction. So what we're talking about 1880. I think around somewhere in the next couple decades, I think we as a people start to see it. Because what is it? Black Wall Street, that's 1920, right? We have the that was the massive. 1920 is the Tulsa Black Wall Street. Yeah. I think that's when that riot. So that's that's 40, 50 years after the period we're talking about. So keep in mind we have to increase our literacy, because when we were released from plantation, we had like some fast literacy rights in the history of the world. Like we all learned to read, really focused. Yeah. So we learning to read. We're still going through sharecropping and black codes. We're still, in slavery, but now it's like, okay, I can take this 5 cents from here, put it with his 5 cents, we can come together. This is when we start having back now. And I think that is the inception of what Tulsa looks like 30, 40 years later. Because now I don't have anything.
Of 50 years of Black people, we all got together. Let's pull our team.
Yeah.
Turn them into dollars. And
that's exactly what we talk about now. We talk about group economics. We talk about spending money in our own community. Like,
I think we still talk about it now. We can do a lot of examples of how it has worked in the past. But we also have to keep in mind that it only worked under the guise of it not being affected by outside influence. Like once white supremacists got involved and they started bombing houses and coming and lynching people, it didn't work because we didn't have government protection to keep them from killing the people that live in those towns. And even now, when we speak on group economics, it's without government protection. We're saying let's pool our money, and then we say, well, what about going to the government for loans or any, and so, no, we don't, but we need the government because that's our right assistance to have it.
And I also,
Yes, to our benefit. Like that's how it's supposed to be. That's not how it is,
yeah,
but that's how it should be.
but I think when you have that conversation with somebody, because I've had that particularly, like, I don't think the average person understands, like when we talk about getting loans from the government, I don't think they have a good financial understanding on what real money is in 2020. Like you go to somebody's like, yo, this dude just got $20,000 loan to start business. It's like, yo, $20,000 is not a lot of money to start business. Why don't you know that? Now to us, 20 racks is a lot. Like I don't know too many people.
For
A business, you have to have working capital and all these other things. So I think I never really take that conversation far because I feel like in order to have that conversation, you need to know how many people know it. Like for real. Like unless you're in business and or you're really into doing that research and understanding, like you've been talking about.
We need to know that there are young white individuals out here who get just gifted money.
$50,000.
And then on top of that, they're able to get, thousands, hundreds of thousands from the government or business loans from the government on top of that.
And we have to be aware. Like, we have to be aware.
There was a difference in citizenship, and that's how we get into the building of to America. So kind of moving on into chapter 8 is the mention that on the Missouri Compromise in chapter 8, U.S. federal legislation has admitted Maine to the Union as a free state, simultaneously had Missouri enter as a slave state. This maintained the balance of power between the North and the South and the U.S. So again, it still gives more evidence to the fact that the North really didn't care. They just wanted power. And so in getting Maine into the Union, they said, fine, y'all can have this. We just want to grow.
Yeah. Well, I think that is not a sign of desperation. Because like for me to be fighting on something, if they give up all of a sudden and there's no middle ground, I feel like that talks about how the North is. Like I very much see the North in the same way I view like the Europe as compared to Africa. We talk about natural resources. Like what do you produce at that point?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like New York and those types of metro areas, they didn't produce like the South produced. So it's like, what are you offering to? The only thing you got is you've been around long, so to speak. Like New York was a very established area before you have the Southern state. But now we know that, like they say all the time, cotton is king. Nobody's pulling in this much money in this plantation, and it's not even close. I think that honestly, I feel like chattel slavery in America changed the world.
It really did. There's evidence of how
and we have to keep that in mind as well. Because I think about if you're put yourself in that perspective. Put yourself in the perspective of you're in the North, you're managing stocks. You understand the international space that you're in trade. You know that you don't produce much in the North. I mean, you know why the money's coming and going. So now you see the country falling apart, and the South is saying, no, we run it. They are. Yeah, like we can do this without you. Like we can skip over you and do this ourselves.
And I think the North realized that because that might be possibly why they were trying to push forth an adjustment.
Oh yeah.
Because the South was like, y'all struggling up there, we can cut that out. We can just bypass it and work directly with our European
I don't think that that's fully true. I think they had to go through connections to the north, New York, straight to London. I don't think the South had the wealth centers that were already connected to France
I don't think
and
it was.
England. So there was a bit of a symbiosis in that regard.
Yeah, because the North had that established relationship
Yeah.
with foreign trade. You know, the South, you know, we
London in particular.
yeah, specific.
Yeah.
Now, but I do feel as though, you know, when being a Southern boy, I feel like the way we did.
That's how there's some more. There were people in London who said, or in England that we're about, or not, but the American Revolution says we're about to abolish slavery.
Yeah.
So if you don't do something now, it's y'all gonna be messed up.
But see, we have to be careful about that, because like the reading I read about that, because that's why a lot of Southerners wanted to fight for the North, because it was like, well, if I fight for them, I get my freedom. But we know that afterwards, a lot of these people were reintroduced in slavery anyway.
Yeah.
So that, you know, and it's stuff like that when I think about when laws are passed, what they really mean. Like, I don't think there was ever any real intent for the slave. It was just, they were just a pawn in a bigger game of politics. Because I look at the American, you know, the American Revolution, that's our war as ADOS people. Because you had guys that, you know, ran from the South to the North after they escaped the plantation, picked up rifles and then fought again. Matter of fact, one of the guys named Gordon. You ever see the picture of the slave Wilkes on the back? His name is Gordon. I actually created this lecture on it. His name is Gordon. So he was the Southern guy. He was state he was from. But he literally runs, escapes to the North. No shooting, no nothing. Picks up a gun once he gets there, turns around and start fighting. Like, that's our war. Like, we fought the American Revolution. Like, it was about slavery completely, like, in totality. And I think that's where you see ADOS people take up a stand and say, okay, I'm going to fight for this. And it kind of goes from there. But I don't know, man. I don't see the genuineness with freeing the freedom or anything similarly related to that. Because in every situation where you have a politician saying we're going to be slaves or we're going to give you these rights, like some of the first people to be integrated into schools. You integrate a school, but you have to have the National Guard. So my question is always, what happens when the National Guard's not there? Like, and then if you integrate a school with one kid, and I think Malcolm talks a lot about this school should be open to every child that's qualified, not just one. It doesn't matter that you got one either. Yeah. Because if she's smart enough to do the work, or he's smart enough to do the work, they should be there. It should be a comfortable living. But see, and that's that's the challenge I kind of put against right now. It's like, you know, we look at racism, but I think it's affected the opposite way more than it is to us. Because my question to white is always, what are you so angry at? Like, what's the issue? Like, for real? Because, you know, white America makes us out to be the problem. But it's like, we talk about murder and rape. You know, white America leads the charge, you know, for thousands and thousands. Yeah. But I think we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at, we have to look at American history and through reality. Because we, like you said, we look at the Black Wall Street, and yeah, Black Wall Street was demolished because of like race. But it's like, okay, where was the slave build the Black Wall Street? And I think it was how I view it in 2020. Understand when we create something that's successful, and we have something that's going, understand there's going to be something people that's going to try to pull it up or destroy it. Every time, whether that's financially, whether that's legally, whether that's illegally, it's coming. And it's always been. So I just feel like that's something we have to prepare for. We have to be prepared to deal with it. I think that's more American than ever. Honestly, in my opinion, like that's always been a part of it.
What, white usurping?
Well, yeah, as soon as like with Black Wall Street, we got something great. We working with each other. We had black ownership. We're doing great business. Now there's a race. And like I try to tell people a lot of times, That's so Oklahoma. The same thing happens in Raleigh. The same thing happens in Birmingham. The same thing happens in the Red Summer of 1919 in Chicago. Like, or when they bloody Kansas, they have.
That were rioting.
Yeah, that's what they call it, the Red Summer. And so when that, think about that, you have all of these communities in America where you literally have a concentration of Black people working, living, and ultimately thriving. And now all of a sudden, they're just random race riots. Like, I feel like in 2020, we have to understand that's a part of America. Like,
the effect of that community has taken decades
to build
be
this.
built up, and then some of the destroyed them.
That I feel like that's American history. That
And
we'll
then
never read the
those
books.
poverty.
Yeah.
I mean, people. People lost all of it. I mean, when you think about the actuality of it, when people are ran out of town, what does that mean? Where did they go?
I mean, I feel like they
Like,
know to where.
I mean, they were running for their lives. They didn't have a chance to grab and they just ran.
And then we have
to wherever.
We have to also think about.
Whoever became their
Yeah, but isn't that Black America now? Like, think about what happened now. We face gentrification. Yeah, so where do we go? We go to wherever it's cheap, really wherever we can. I just feel like we're running out of places to run to. Because money still, pricing. We haven't made more money since we did in 2001. We're going to a point that I was going to make to you earlier. When we look at the Tulsa, the Raleigh, Chicago, all those cities, and we think about London, we also have to think about everywhere in between where if I'm a Black homeowner, or I'm a Black landowner, random, i.e. white guy walks up and takes my land, what do? I can't go to the police.
Yeah.
So I'm just out. And those are the stories to me that impact more because I can't even tell you how many times that happened. Like, we know Tulsa only happened once. Raleigh happened once. Red Summer 1919 happened once. How many times did somebody just walk up and say, you know what, this is my house. Those are my cows and this is my farm. And I kill it. So, yeah, because who you going to tell? Which I think, again, goes back to what I said earlier, makes what we do so very important. Let's think about the economic damage. What if that family keeps their house in that property that to now, where are we? And how many of us could have been in that position? And then how many of us should have been in that position? Because even in that case, we're talking about Black people. We're talking about Black people that own the land and make business for themselves. Now we're talking about that, what the top 5% of all Black Americans worth $50,000. That's those people with the house and the land. And they're just getting everything they have taken. That's the upper echelon. So now, if you go facing all that plunder, like we said, we're talking about centuries, not just decades. So now it's like, okay, so what do we do? You know what I'm saying? How do we fix it? But like we discussed earlier, I think we just gotta pull the sheet off. Because I mean, it's really the case. We don't really have to make the case. We could just open our eyes and see. In my opinion.
I have a question. Okay. Yeah, I gotta go with the same joke. I have two thoughts before I leave. I think Andrew Johnson, perfect example. Your argument that it was never intended to Reconstruction was never intended to succeed.
Yeah.
He's the perfect example, and it's all there in chapter 8.
Yeah.
Chapter 8. And then something I was thinking about earlier, I think I heard this. I've been on a podcast recently, kind of talking about the distinction between, and this doesn't specifically relate to any of the things we talked about, but just the general idea of freedom versus liberty, which really resonated whenever within the last week. This notion that there's a concept of freedom in the it is a binary. Like, you are either enslaved, like you are owned by someone else, or you are free to live your life without restriction from another specific human being.
Yeah.
Versus liberty, which is more of a, structural to person relation. So freedom, person to person and person to society versus liberty, structure to human being. So like in that sense, like the Emancipation Proclamation confers freedom from person to person in the South, with lots of categories. But it doesn't confer any kind of liberty, not true liberty, because immediately the enforcement is gone, protections are gone, and then immediately, black codes and ultimately Jim Crow, and those are restrictions on liberty. And it's fascinating like abstraction to think about how often we talk about those terms interchangeably, but they're really different. And it's a super important distinction to say that, like, yeah, black people are free in this country now because they're not allowed to be enslaved. But that doesn't mean that they are free in the sense of liberty, economic liberty, psychological liberty, sociological.
Well, to push back to that really quickly, one, okay, because I think about what I grew up, right? So if you think about my hometown, you know how I-70 cuts Kansas City north to south, right? So I-20 runs through my hometown, so cuts my city to the south. So in my hometown, let's just say hypothetically, I'm free. I can't tell you much, if anything, about anything north about in my hometown.
Yeah.
I lived there for 22 years. Every time I go north and sun's down, I'm getting it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So my question to that is, am I free if I'm restricted in that way?
Yeah, I know, and I'm not saying that it's cut and dry.
Yeah,
it's totally not. But it's a different way of thinking about the concept of freedom and liberty.
Well, is it?
And it's really, I think it's really helpful because you can make that exact argument.
Yeah.
Someone says, like, you have your freedom that you want.
To a certain extent.
No, I'm free from being enslaved, but I don't have other types of freedom. I don't have freedom. And I definitely don't have freedom. I don't have liberty, economic liberty,
Isn't the key,
cultural, like,
isn't the key to, the relationship between freedom and liberty, I would think, is access. Like, do I have access to get that job or get that education?
Yeah.
Because if I'm free, like when Yvette talks a lot about plugs and outlets, freedom is my plug. But what good is freedom if I can't plug it in there?
Right.
So
and
it's
that's
like,
the restriction.
It's so easy to really freedom.
So you have physical freedom because you have this plug, put it in there, you have no
outlet,
no liberty to actually
plug it in,
make it work.
Yeah. And I think that has to be, and to me, I guess it gets frustrating when we're having that conversation because it's so, to me, it's an easy concept. Just like that we talk about degrees. What good is a degree if you can't get jobs to pay for the student loans? And it's the same thing.
Or
So,
if you it's entry level pay.
Yeah. And then you can't, you're owed more money. Or you owe more money than you ever have to pay off. So essentially you're in a rat race.
Because then you also have to that even going to college means, for like Americans, that you're taking on some substantial amount of debt.
Yes.
Far more compared to white college students who might have the benefit of parents and grandparents and uncles who have contributed to their college education in ways that make them less susceptible to higher after. They're not rebuilding that happen. I just need a job. You know what I mean? Like they have the benefit of working and saying, okay, you got to do now. Let me stop that doesn't really work so much in black communities because we don't have those. We have. We don't have those out there.
I gotta go.
Guys,
Bye.
I'm gonna just. Layton, do you have your book with you today?
I know. I left the book at the house. Should have brought it.
Okay. So I'm gonna sit here.
Yeah, I smooth, bro. I smooth that.
All right. I had a point I wanted to make about a quote from a vegan. And I will not be active. I have to log into MI. Other problem not to do this from that part. So towards the end of chapter 7, after all the examples of what happened after the war, or in the slaves who fought for the North, would the Civil War have had the outcome it did without the added involvement of former slaves? If Freeman had gone to the North, joined the army, how would the Civil War have been different? How would the outcome of the war have been different?
Well, if Confederates win, which I would almost feel like, I can't say that it turns out too different, because even with Confederates losing, we still keep the Confederate flag, we still keep the statue. Even after the Civil War, like think about 50, 60 years later, we know blacks in the South are not treated the same as blacks in the North. Not to say blacks in the North are treated good, but we know there's that. Like I said, if we don't have those slaves fighting for the freedom, I feel like America as we know it today is similar, but I think we can have, maybe the Civil Rights Act. You know what I'm saying? Because even with the Civil Rights Act, like to me, I can't think about, when I think about the Civil Rights Act, I can't help but think about what happened after we passed the Civil Rights Act and voter suppression. Just like with the Emancipation Proclamation. We passed the Emancipation Proclamation, but in my mind, the Emancipation Proclamation can't be real if Juneteenth is a thing. You see what I'm saying? Like, either we freed all the slaves or we didn't. So how do we celebrate Juneteenth if the Emancipation Proclamation is what we say?
And I think even then, I mean, there's evidence now of slaves that were
Still
were like in the
Mississippi,
like 1930s.
Yeah,
Like I've seen threads where people are sharing how their relatives, their grandparents, great grandparents were slaves.
Well, I know specifically.
And they're out there, people in their 30s and 40s are talking about how their great grandparents.
And now we're talking about enforcement, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're saying when we pass this law, free the slave, but if there's nobody there enforcing this
Right,
law.
and I think there's in that there's an additional disconnect that the union didn't bother with enforcing. I think Andrew Jackson enabled state private versus federal overall law. So pretty much, they were still doing whatever they wanted.
And as a president, if you're enforcing state law, in this particular case, like we're talking about slavery.
And that was from Lincoln initiative.
He carried on.
Yeah, we can in construction, and Jackson went up on that and said the states have the right to decide.
So again, we go to the Civil War, we have the Emancipation Proclamation, and yet the states still have their right to choose. Like, so what does the legislation mean?
And I mean, and then that it's a simple breakdown to make it, real. If you were a former plantation owner and you have slaves and you say, I don't care, y'all ain't leave, I'm gonna bounce, bring you back.
With change.
That's not free. That's still slavery.
And I think looking at it, what makes it a lot more real now, you have former black families that still work for the people that they were enslaved by 100, 200 years ago. Like I've seen this on Vice, I've seen episodes where you have families that still work on the same plantation, doing jobs today from the people that actually owned them, you know what I'm saying, several generations before him. But like, you know, I think that's what we do. Like,
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I don't think.
Go ahead, Al. Make the music yourself, Al.
No, I muted my. Were you done with someone? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to chapter 9. So within 1 month of the swearing-in ceremony, President Johnson, acting independently of Congress, implemented a fundamentally divergent Reconstruction. And we talked about it a little bit, but I asked, was there any sign during the vice presidency that he would go against his previous stand of seeming to be in agreement with radical questions and who stopped past bills such as the wage bill? And this introduced an increase to 50% of whites to be required to take an oath before their state could rejoin the union. It would have also given Black Americans the right to vote. So this was 1 month after he became president. I was saying that after 1 month after Andrew Johnson became president, outside of Congress, he implemented a divergent Reconstruction plan. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. So I'm asking if there was any sign during his vice presidency that he would go against his previous stand. Did I mention the wage bill that introduced an increase to 50% of whites required to take an oath before their state could join the union? It also would have given Black Americans the right to vote. I think in Johnson's Reconstruction, or his reconstruction of the Reconstruction, took the number of 50% down to 10%. On southern states to rejoin the union, and also on Christmas Day in 1868, he granted a universal pardon to the entire Confederacy. Or go ahead, I think she's there.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
Okay. So, throughout Reconstruction from 1863 through 1877, white paramilitary groups organized to intimidate women and Republicans that helped black organize. There were multiple groups. Today we speak mainly about the Ku Klux Klan, but there were also the Red Shirts, the Knights of White Camilla, the White League, the White Shirt, and the White Brotherhood. And each of these groups worked to restore property, maim and kill Black Americans and their allies. The Georgia General Assembly, this is moving on to later on in chapter 9. The Georgia General Assembly, consisting of an all-white delegation, ratified the 13th Amendment, which made it legal to enslave someone as punishment for a crime. Now, I'll pause for a moment. It's telling that this one state is how the ratification of the 13th Amendment took place. It wasn't a general consensus among all the states in the Union. It was just one, just Georgia who did it. And then I noted that the amendment, the 13th Amendment, was ratified in 1865, and it is still constitutional in 2020. It's still legal to put someone back into slavery if they commit a crime.
And we love it. We should.
And then moving on to Mississippi, it required all Black Americans 18 and older to labor 6 days a week for survival success. They mandated an on-call employment at night, outdoors, in inclement weather, on weekends, or whenever necessary. No, this is for, in Mississippi, if you were a Black American in Mississippi, these are the conditions under which you had to work.
Oh.
So you had to work 6 days a week. You had to work from sunrise to sunset. You had to work whenever your employer wanted you to work. At night, outdoors, rain, shine, cold, whatever. Yep. These is
I mean, don't we have part of prison that shows us, I don't know if y'all are familiar with part of prison. It's Mississippi's first, well, I think it's like Mississippi State. But they just had a big issue where, you know, as far as prison conditions, people would get stabbed and shot and infected. You know, it was like, it was a big issue in the movie. I think that's just a representation. And I think Mississippi, I almost want to say Mississippi is the blackest state in America. Yet they don't have Black elected officials. They are in some of the worst positions. I think the way their state legislature is set up, it's set up in the sense of checks and balances that won't allow, you know, let's say a leftist to excel, like the way the checks and balances are set up. It's kind of like gerrymandering, but I think Mississippi is one of those states that I feel like that's what we measure now. Like the Mississippi is what we measure now. because like they say in the same just so like they agree with Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. We agree. Well, I never heard.
Like I'm like you've never listened. We're getting distracted here by this music. But you've never heard the whole verse? Like the all like
Who listened to the song? What did you find?
I grew up in the 90s. I'm in 80s. I was born in 85. I grew up in the 90s. I listened to jazzy art. But anyway. Let me see. Okay. So my last point in chapter 9 is it was established to provide a safe repository for assets of former black slaves and their unfortunately fraud and embezzlement at the hands of majority white upper management and a board of trustees, plus the panic of 1873 led to the bank's closure. More than 61,000 depositors were unable to retrieve accounts valued at almost $3 million. And if you've ever done any research on the Freedmen's Bank, you'll know that I think it was originally managed by whites. And what they did is they took the money that Black Americans just coming out of slavery were able to get, and they convinced them to put it into the bank so it would be safe. And what they did is they guaranteed white mortgages against those deposits. At the same time, not giving Black Americans the same access to home loans that they were giving the white. So, yeah, because what the loans were bad, like white Americans were defaulting on the loan, and there is no. Yeah, exactly. So once they realized that what would happen if they brought in Black management to appease the Black Americans were coming to money out by they didn't do that. So by the panic of 1873, there was really no. They just lost. They lost those millions of dollars. Yeah.
You live with this bank located? What I wonder is like, what is the recourse? Is that not what we do now? Like, coronavirus, we bail out airlines, big banks, big pharmaceutical industries, and then we wind up suffering. So did anything change? Yeah. Coffee got it.
All right, so let's move on. Over. We're good. We're good. So we're gonna start with chapter 10. And okay, so towards the end of Reconstruction, Black American farmers managed to amass 15 million acres of land by their own efforts by 1910. And this was the peak of land ownership among ADOS farmers. Then there is the question of what happened to the land. Well, we know that between white supremacists and white paramilitary groups who just came and seized the land, we know that a lot of Black Americans didn't have government protection from that, so they lost the land that way. We know that there were predatory loans that were issued from the government, which made it hard for Black Americans to not default on those loans. So they also lost the land that way. An example is that in the 1940s, a Black American minister, Isaac Simmons, plus his family owned 270 acres. There were rumors of oil on the land when they began. A white man ordered him to stop his logging activity. He sought legal help, which resulted in the man torturing and killing him. They drove his family off the land and took control of it. And this was on March 26, 1941. Or sorry, 1944. And then I have a note. The system of American apartheid reinforced under Plessy v. Ferguson was not deemed officially illegal until the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. All right, and those are all the notes I have for today. And so I think we're just going to end there at chapter 10. So as we've discussed so far, there are clear indications of how freedom after the Civil War wasn't really true freedom for Black Americans. We didn't have the government protection. We still were facing brutality from white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War, and our Reconstruction wasn't sustained. So so we didn't even make it into the 1880s before a lot of our wealth was the very little wealth we had managed to accumulate was stolen from us. Next week, we will start with how all of this information, all of the examples you shared, tie into the creation of reparations, the chapters 11 and 12. So we're going to end it here. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you, those who came for me today. If you want to join our discussions, there is a link to join on our ADOSKC Twitter page. So just go there and just follow that link. And again, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you want to add your input, we would love to hear your opinions. Please add those into the comments as well. We will see you all next week. Bye-bye.